Top Gun was about speed, brotherhood, and young pilots who seemed untouchable. It sold us the fantasy that confidence and courage could outrun anything. But away from the cockpit, real life proved far crueler. Some of the cherished actors faced painful declines, sudden losses, and tragic endings. Join us as we remember who they were and honor the legacies they left behind. Clarence Gilyard Jr. as Sundown, the radar intercept officer in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Clarence Gilyard Jr. At 31 years old, he stepped into one of the most iconic aviation films of the 1980s with quiet precision and restraint. That small role would later become one of the most frequently remembered moments of a career defined by discipline rather than domination. Born on December 24, 1955, in Moses Lake, Washington, Clarence Darnell Gilyard Jr. spent much of his professional life confronting a subtle but persistent ceiling. Hollywood valued his intelligence and dependability, yet rarely trusted him with central power. Even after gaining widespread attention as Theo in Die Hard, 1988, he found himself locked into supporting positions, visible but rarely elevated. As the years passed, physical limitations began shaping his choices more than ambition ever had. Type 2 diabetes quietly altered the rhythm of his life, forcing constant monitoring and periods of withdrawal from demanding work schedules. The illness progressed slowly but relentlessly, and heart complications followed, turning routine days into calculated acts of endurance. Rather than disappear, Gilyard redirected his energy toward purpose. He became an associate professor of acting at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, committing himself to teaching stage and screen performance. Alongside academia, he continued appearing selectively in projects such as A Matter of Faith, 2014, choosing roles that aligned with his physical limits and personal values. Clarence Gilyard Jr. passed away on November 28, 2022, at the age of 66, after prolonged complications from diabetes and cardiovascular disease. He died at home in Las Vegas and was cremated following a private ceremony. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth of around $5 million reflected a life sustained by acting, teaching, and unwavering discipline rather than excess. Frank Pesce as Bartender. Bartender, the grounded working-class figure in Top Gun, 1986, was played by Frank Pesce. At 40 years old, he appeared briefly, anchoring the film's heightened masculinity with something unmistakably real. That fleeting moment captured the pattern of his entire career. Born on December 8, 1946, in New York City, Frank Pesce spent decades fighting for stability inside an industry that rarely paused to notice him. He worked constantly, yet remained confined to the edges of stories, despite appearing in more than 80 films. Roles in Beverly Hills Cop, 1984, and Midnight Run, 1988, placed him beside major stars, but the spotlight never lingered. The imbalance between effort and reward created lasting financial and emotional strain. Illness entered his life long before the final chapter. Pesce survived cancer, continuing to work while confronting the fragility of his own body. Years later came the more devastating diagnosis: dementia, a disease that attacked memory rather than muscle. It dismantled his ability to memorize lines, recognize faces, and remain independent, slowly severing his connection to the craft that had defined him. As dementia progressed, Pesce's professional world narrowed. One of his last screen appearances came in Creed, 2015, quietly closing a circle that had begun decades earlier as an uncredited extra in The Godfather Part 2. Withdrawal from Hollywood was gradual, marked by silence rather than farewell. Frank Pesce died on February 6, 2022, at the age of 75 in Burbank, California, from complications related to dementia. He was laid to rest at St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx, returning him to his roots. At the time of his death, His estimated net worth of approximately $2 million stood as proof of a lifetime of steady work. Tom Cruise as Maverick, the reckless naval aviator in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Tom Cruise. At 24 years old, he exploded onto the screen with a mix of arrogance, charm, and raw ambition that instantly defined a generation. The role didn't just make him famous, it locked him into a public image that would follow him for decades. From that moment on, every step forward would come with unbearable pressure to never fall. Born on July 3, 1962 in Syracuse, New York, Thomas Cruise Mapother IV built his career inside constant tension. His devotion to Scientology became a professional liability, costing him public goodwill and reportedly damaging studio relationships at the height of his fame. Even as he carried franchises like Mission Impossible, 1996 to 2025 on his back, criticism never stopped. Accusations of control, intensity, and obsession followed him from set to set. Physically, Cruise pushed his body beyond safe limits. His insistence on performing extreme stunts led to repeated injuries, the most infamous being a broken ankle during Mission Impossible, Fallout, 2018, when a failed rooftop jump nearly ended production. Though no chronic illness has been publicly disclosed, years of relentless stress, physical trauma, and psychological pressure have taken a visible toll. Instead of slowing down, Cruise doubled down. In the years leading up to 2026, he completed Top Gun, Maverick, 2022, transforming nostalgia into a billion-dollar phenomenon, then closed his long-running arc as Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, 2025. He continued producing, training, flying aircraft, and planning physically demanding projects, refusing the safety net most actors his age accept. By 2026, Tom Cruise is 64 years old and still standing at the center of Hollywood's action machine. He remains actively involved in film production, large-scale stunts, and international projects. With an estimated net worth of around $600 million, his legacy is built on risk, not just financial or professional, but physical and psychological. Val Kilmer as Iceman, the cool, controlled rival pilot in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Val Kilmer. At 27 years old, he brought icy precision and quiet menace to the screen, standing in perfect contrast to Maverick's chaos. The role made him unforgettable, but it also fixed a perception he would struggle to escape. From that point on, brilliance and resistance followed him side by side. Born on December 31, 1959 in Los Angeles, California, Val Edward Kilmer's career became a study in contradiction. Revered for performances in The Doors, 1991, and Tombstone, 1993, he was also labeled difficult, a reputation that slowly closed doors. Roles diminished not because of lack of talent, but because collaboration became fraught. Illness changed everything. Diagnosed with throat cancer in 2014, Kilmer endured chemotherapy, radiation, and multiple tracheotomies that permanently destroyed his natural speaking voice. Communication became mechanical, exhausting, humiliating at times. The disease did not just threaten his life, it dismantled the core of his craft. Even so, Kilmer refused to vanish. He documented his struggle in Val, 2021, exposing vulnerability rarely seen in Hollywood icons, and returned one final time as Iceman in Top Gun, Maverick, 2022. His voice digitally assisted, but his presence devastatingly human. In his last years, he focused on writing, painting, and preserving his story, aware time was no longer negotiable. Val Kilmer passed away on April 1, 2025, at the age of 65, due to pneumonia and respiratory failure following years of cancer-related complications. He died at home in Los Angeles and was later cremated. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth of approximately $25 million reflected a career of immense talent, shadowed by loss. Anthony Edwards as Goose Goose, the warm-hearted radar intercept officer in Top Gun, 1986, was played by Anthony Edwards. At 24 years old, he brought humor and humanity to a film defined by speed and ego, then vanished abruptly in one of the most shocking deaths of 1980s cinema. That single moment etched his face into pop culture. Born July 19, 1962, in Santa Barbara, California, Edwards discovered quickly that success does not always widen opportunity. After Top Gun, the industry struggled to imagine him beyond Goose. Serious film efforts like Miracle Mile, 1988, and Pet Sematary 2, 1992, showed range and risk, yet box office uncertainty reinforced the idea that he was better suited for supporting roles. The pressure of being recognized everywhere but trusted nowhere became a slow, grinding professional wound. Behind that tension lived deeper, long-buried damage. Edwards later revealed that he carried psychological trauma from childhood sexual abuse, and it resurfaced during periods of intense work stress. The toll expressed itself through anxiety, withdrawal, and a persistent sense of vulnerability that followed him from set to set. The turning point arrived with ER. From 1994 to 2002, Edwards embodied Dr. Mark Green, a role that mirrored his own quiet gravity and emotional restraint. The series demanded relentless schedules, moral intensity, and emotional exposure, earning him a Golden Globe and multiple Emmy nominations. When he chose to leave, it was not creative exhaustion alone. It was a conscious decision to protect himself after nearly a decade of carrying other people's pain on screen. By 2026, Edwards is 64 years old. He continues to act selectively, direct, and support charitable and advocacy work, favoring substance over visibility. The financial security built during ER, with an estimated net worth of around $40 million, gave him the rare luxury of stepping back without disappearing, choosing longevity of spirit over constant relevance. Kelly McGillis as Charlie, the composed civilian instructor in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Kelly McGillis. At 29 years old, she matched confidence with intellect, offering a counterweight to the film's bravado. Yet that balance masked a private history of trauma that fame would neither heal nor protect. Kelly Ann McGillis was born July 9, 1957, in Newport Beach, California. Early acclaim from Witness, 1985, and later The Accused, 1988, placed her among Hollywood's most respected actresses, but her career unfolded under relentless strain. Casting opportunities narrowed as she aged, not because of diminished talent, but because the industry quietly withdrew interest. Offers slowed, then stopped, pushing her towards smaller projects and eventual withdrawal from mainstream cinema. The professional pressure was compounded by severe psychological scars. McGillis survived multiple sexual assaults, beginning in adolescence and continuing into adulthood, experiences that led to long-term PTSD, depression, and periods of substance dependency. These were not abstract struggles. They affected her ability to work, to trust, and to remain visible in an industry that often punished vulnerability more harshly than failure. Rather than chasing reinvention, she chose distance. In the years that followed, McGillis returned selectively in darker, intimate projects such as Stakeland, 2010, and We Are What We Are, 2013, roles that reflected endurance rather than glamour. Alongside acting, she devoted time to teaching and working with people recovering from addiction, channeling her history into quiet service instead of public narrative. By 2026, McGillis is 69 years old, living far from Hollywood's center, focused on teaching, recovery work, and a deliberately private life. Her estimated net worth of around $4 million reflects not a decline, but a conscious refusal to trade safety and dignity for longevity in an industry that once applauded her, and then looked away. Tom Skerritt, as Viper, the seasoned commander of the Top Gun program in Top Gun, 1986, was played by Tom Skerritt. At 53 years old, he stood apart from the younger pilots, carrying authority that felt lived in rather than performed. His calm voice and restrained presence anchored the film emotionally. Yet that quiet strength hid a career forged through pressure, doubt, and constant recalibration. Born on August 25, 1933 in Detroit, Michigan, Skerritt entered Hollywood without shortcuts. His career unfolded during the turbulent New Hollywood era, where visibility did not guarantee stability. Even after a breakout turn in MASH, 1970, studios hesitated to trust him as a bankable lead, pushing him back into supporting parts and obscure projects. He endured stretches where momentum stalled, accepting roles simply to remain active, while watching younger actors surge ahead with fewer credits and less discipline. The strain was cumulative rather than sudden. Skerritt carried the mental weight of having to outwork perception, balancing film after film without the security of a single defining franchise. Performances in Alien, 1979, and The Dead Zone, 1983, became cultural touchstones, yet they did not free him from uncertainty. Each success was followed by another proving ground, another reminder that longevity required endurance more than applause. Instead of withdrawing, he shifted direction. In the 1990s, Skerritt committed to television with Picket Fences, 1992 to 1996, a demanding role that required emotional continuity and moral complexity week after week. The performance earned him a Primetime Emmy Award, validating decades of persistence. In later years, he continued acting steadily, appeared in films like A River Runs Through It and Contact, reunited with former collaborators in Lucky, 2017, and devoted time to veteran-focused creative programs, using art as a form of service. By 2026, Tom Skerritt is 93 years old, living quietly, still respected for discipline rather than spectacle. With an estimated net worth of about $8 million, his legacy is not measured by box office dominance, but by survival, a career that endured when many others quietly disappeared. Meg Ryan as Carol Bradshaw. Carol Bradshaw, the gentle, grounded wife of Goose in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Meg Ryan. At 25 years old, she appeared briefly, yet memorably, offering warmth inside a film driven by speed and masculine competition. That small role arrived just before her life accelerated beyond control. What followed was not a smooth ascent, but a collision between fame and expectation. Born on November 19, 1961, in Fairfield, Connecticut, Ryan's rise was explosive. After When Harry Met Sally, 1989, and Sleepless in Seattle, 1993, she became Hollywood's emotional shorthand for romance itself. But success narrowed her options. Studios expected repetition, not evolution, and when she pushed against that mold with Courage Under Fire, 1996, and later In the Cut, 2003, the response was harsh. Risk was punished, curiosity reframed as betrayal. Public pressure intensified the damage. Media obsession with her appearance turned deeply personal choices into global ridicule. Cosmetic surgery rumors overshadowed performances, reducing decades of work to tabloid shorthand. Roles evaporated not because of ability, but because the industry withdrew permission for her to change. Ryan redirected her energy rather than fighting the narrative. She stepped away from constant exposure, choosing fewer projects and more control. In the years that followed, she appeared in independent films, then moved behind the camera, directing Ithaca, 2015, a quiet, reflective work that mirrored her own retreat from noise. Her return with What Happens Later, 2023, embraced maturity and loss instead of denying them, signaling a shift from performance to authorship. By 2026, Meg Ryan is 65 years old, focused on directing, writing, and selective acting rather than chasing relevance. With an estimated net worth of around $85 million, she no longer measures success by visibility. Her legacy rests on a harder truth, that sometimes survival in Hollywood means knowing when to step away and why. Michael Ironside as Jester, the sharp-tongued Top Gun instructor in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Michael Ironside. At 36 years old, he brought a biting realism to the cockpit, sounding less like a movie character and more like a man who had survived pressure, failure, and authority. His presence was brief but unforgettable, setting the tone for strong career. Born February 12, 1950, in Toronto, Canada, Ironside built his reputation through intensity rather than charm. After the breakthrough villain role in Scanners, 1981, Hollywood locked him into a narrow corridor: antagonists, enforcers, men meant to intimidate rather than inspire. Films like Total Recall, 1990, and later Starship Troopers, 1997, cemented his icon status, but also trapped him. The work was constant, yet rarely secure, and the financial pressure of being a reliable heavy meant long stretches of saying yes out of necessity, not choice. The real battle, however, arrived off-screen. In the early 2000s, Ironside was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, followed by additional fights with bowel and prostate cancer. Surgery altered his body and drained his stamina, forcing him to confront the possibility that his career and voice might disappear. Still, he returned to sets weakened but defiant, continuing to act in projects like The Machinist, 2004, and lending his iconic voice to Splinter Cell, turning limitation into adaptation. Rather than retreat, Ironside diversified. He embraced voice acting, television, and character roles that carried less physical strain but deeper psychological weight, appearing in series such as The Flash, The Alienist, and later Nobody, 2021. Each role felt less like reinvention and more like survival, working through pain, dyslexia, ADHD, and the fear of becoming obsolete in an industry that rarely waits. In 2026, Michael Ironside is 76 years old, still resilient, and still working selectively. His estimated net worth of around $8 million reflects not blockbuster excess, but decades of endurance, earned role by role, scar by scar. Tim Robbins as Merlin, the cerebral naval aviator in Top Gun, 1986, was played by Tim Robbins. At 28 years old, he stood out not through bravado but restraint, hinting at an intellect that didn't fit neatly inside Hollywood formulas. That quiet difference would later define both his greatest triumphs and his deepest professional conflicts. Born October 16, 1958, in West Covina, California, Robbins rose quickly, but not comfortably. Success with Bull Durham, 1988, and later The Shawshank Redemption, 1994, made him a critical darling, yet his refusal to separate art from politics created friction. Speaking openly against the Iraq War and industry complacency cost him contracts, invitations, and unspoken access. Hollywood tolerated his talent, but distrusted his voice. The pressure intensified during the 2000s. While winning an Academy Award for Mystic River, 2003, Robbins simultaneously felt the ground shifting beneath him. Film projects collapsed without explanation, studios grew cautious, and he later described the period as a personal and creative crisis, questioning how much of himself he was willing to silence to remain employable. Instead of retreating, Robbins redirected. He focused on socially charged projects, directing Dead Man Walking and later committing to long-form television and theater, including Here and Now, Castle Rock, and Silo. These roles traded mainstream comfort for substance, allowing him to explore power, guilt, and moral collapse without compromise. By 2026, Tim Robbins is 68 years old, still active, politically outspoken, and creatively independent. With an estimated net worth of about $70 million, his career stands as a rare case where conviction survived success and paid for it. James Tolkan as Stinger, the uncompromising commanding officer in Top Gun, 1986, was played by James Tolkan. At 55 years old, he embodied authority without spectacle, delivering discipline through silence, posture, and an iron stare rather than dialogue-heavy bravado. The role was brief but definitive, reinforcing the persona Hollywood had assigned him for decades: the hard man who never blinks. Born June 20th, 1931, Tolkan's career was shaped by endurance more than momentum. He spent years confined to supporting roles, often strict, intimidating figures, rarely allowed emotional range or leading man visibility. Films like War Games, 1983, and Serpico, 1973, gave him exposure, but not elevation. Even after the massive success of Back to the Future, 1985, where he became iconic as Mr. Strickland, Tolkan still found himself typecast, respected yet quietly sidelined in an industry obsessed with novelty. Physically, Tolkan carried scars long before fame. His early discharge from the U.S. Navy due to a heart condition permanently altered his path, cutting short a potential military career and forcing him into uncertainty. Though the condition never fully derailed his acting work, it shaped his worldview, instilling discipline, restraint, and an appreciation for survival rather than ambition. In the years that followed Top Gun, Tolkan continued working steadily, appearing in projects such as Masters of the Universe, 1987, Dick Tracy, 1990, and numerous television roles. He remained deeply connected to theater, often stating that stage work, not film fame, was where he felt most alive. By the 2000s, he gradually stepped back, choosing selective appearances, fan conventions, and retrospectives over relentless production schedules. By 2026, James Tolkan is 95 years old, retired, and living quietly. His estimated net worth of around $5 million reflects a lifetime of persistence rather than stardom, earned through reliability, dignity, and the rare ability to be unforgettable without ever demanding the spotlight. Rick Rossovich as Slider, the sharp-edged co-pilot in Top Gun, 1986, was portrayed by Rick Rossovich. At 29 years old, he projected confidence, rivalry, and physical presence, standing shoulder to shoulder with Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise during one of the most iconic moments of the 1980s cinema. At the time, it seemed like the beginning of something unstoppable. Born August 28, 1957, Rossovich surged quickly through early successes, appearing in The Terminator, 1984, and later shining in Roxanne, 1987. Yet after the late 1980s, momentum faded. Hollywood's shifting tastes, combined with Rossovich's refusal to chase roles aggressively, led to fewer offers. Unlike many peers, he didn't fight the decline. He accepted it, even when it meant watching opportunities evaporate. There was no major illness or scandal forcing him away, only fatigue with the industry itself. The pressure to remain visible, competitive, and endlessly available clashed with his priorities. While working on television series like Pacific Blue, he began questioning whether fame was worth the cost. Acting became less a calling and more a negotiation. By the early 2000s, Rossovich made a deliberate choice to step away. After projects like Miracle in Lane 2, 2000, he sold his Hollywood home, relocated abroad, and focused on family life and personal peace. Occasional discussions about a comeback surfaced, but he consistently emphasized that financial independence and emotional stability mattered more than screen time. In 2026, Rick Rossovich is 69 years old, living largely out of the public eye. His estimated net worth of approximately $800,000 reflects a rare Hollywood ending, not collapse or tragedy, but a conscious exit on his own terms. They once ruled the skies, etched into our memories through moments of courage, rivalry, and sacrifice. but time claimed them far too soon. Which of these Top Gun stars' final stories moved you the most, and was there one loss you never truly recovered from as a fan? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want more untold stories, hidden struggles, and emotional legacies from Hollywood's greatest icons, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next.